today on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And now, here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back, everyone, to Las Vegas's only All Raiders talk show, Silver and Black Today, here on CBS Sports Radio 1140, as week number 4 of Bunker Broadcasting continues, and hopefully we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel in fighting this thing. Hey, everybody, I am Scott Gulbransen, your humble host and founder of Silver and Black Today, which you can also find in the form of an independent news source, the only one covering the Raiders based here in Las Vegas, at silverandblacktoday.com. Check it out. Great content up there. You don't want to miss it. Also, reminder, we are streaming the show live via the radio.com app. It's the best way to take the show with you and all of the great programming you find here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Download it for free for your iOS or Android device. Believe me, you will not regret that as well. And it's a rundown of a busy show as usual. Today, we got some great guests we want you to know about and not miss. So here we go. First hour, CBSSports.com NFL and college football writer Josh Edwards will be with us. He'll talk about the Raiders' pressing need at wide receiver and what players he feels best fit them at picks number 12 and 19. We'll get his breakdown of the hotly contested 1-2-3 wide receiver class, and that'll be right after this first break. At the bottom of the hour, former NFL general manager and front office executive with the Raiders, Browns, and Patriots, Michael Lombardi, is back again for a visit. He'll talk about the Raiders' free agency haul and how it will most likely impact their draft board this coming next week, especially in the first round. He'll give us who he thinks GM Mike Mayock and John Gruden nab at number 12 here in just under 2 weeks at the NFL virtual draft. We'll talk about that in a little while. Then at the top of the second hour, a real treat as we bring in a huge Raiders fan and a well-known actor, Lee Arenberg. You remember this, right?
Hello, Bobby.
Oh, yeah. Best known for his roles in Pirates of the Caribbean as Pirate Pintel, who uttered that legendary sound and line, will be with us as well. Arenberg will talk about his acting career, which includes memorable roles in Seinfeld, various Star Trek episodes, and, of course, playing Grumpy in the hit TV series Once Upon a Time. He beat out Kelly Kriner for that role. We'll talk about that with Kelly later. And his love for Raiders football, Raider Nation, and more. He'll be with us for almost the full half hour at the start of hour number 2. Then we'll finish the show with a draft preview of cornerbacks. That's right, cornerbacks. They could be on the Raiders' radar, and we'll brace ourselves for Kelly's corner as well. And, of course, this show, I don't do it alone, folks. I have 2 co-hosts, and we'll bring them in right now. Excuse me, I'm choked up. I just miss these guys so much. Mr. Kelly Kriner and Mr. Chaz Osborne. Are you guys all keeping your sanity?
What I had to begin with, yeah.
Yeah, that's getting a little weird. I had pizza and cereal for dinner last night. Getting a little close to the edge.
Like at the same time?
That was kind of like dinner and dessert, I guess.
Hey, man, you got to have breakfast for dinner is a good thing, man, as my kids will always tell you. They're on board for that all the time. But, guys, listen, we're gonna talk with our guest today about this whole virtual draft thing as well. Of course, you saw John Harbaugh, the coach of the Baltimore Ravens, and other team officials have expressed concerns about the technology they'll have to use conducting the draft from home. I mean, the rest of the world is working from home just fine, including Fortune 500 companies, including governmental agencies. Is this much to do about nothing, guys, that these guys think that there's going to be some kind of big problem?
Well, the biggest issue of something like this is like when I'm working at home, I don't have much of a time limit on the stuff that I'm doing. You know, we have here where we've got set times where we do stuff. But if my feed goes out, you guys can still do the show. Doesn't really matter. If you're on the draft and your feed goes out and you get skipped on your pick, like we saw the Vikings a few years ago, to where they didn't get their pick in on time, it could completely change the draft.
Yeah, but getting your pick on time, I'm sure the NFL is going to have some sort of fail-safe system to do that, or they extend the time or something like that. But then how do you know that people are being truthful with that? I mean, I think that wrinkle, I get it. But with Harbaugh, he was particularly focused on security, like people were going to be spying on them or something like that. Because if you're on some kind of joint platform and you got some IT guy that might be be versed in the black arts, Bill Belichick, then there might be an opportunity for these teams to be spying on each other. You guys think there's any issue with that?
No, I think they just go back to the old way of doing things. They put their board up, and I think the Raiders probably have an advantage here because last year, we talked about it on the show where they dismissed the scouts and everybody, a week before the draft. So they've kind of already gone through this with a skeleton crew. So they'll have their basic, board up, and there's only 2 or 3 people that are really a voice in that draft room, anyways. And as far as the, all the system, everything going down, it's basically just a phone call. So I think they just go back to 1982. They put up their whiteboard and they just make phone calls. So I really don't know what Harbaugh's, big concern would be.
Well, what if you're working on a trade with somebody and their phone, and I'm doing air quotes, nobody can see, magically goes out?
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And the NFL teams are paranoid anyway. Anytime you add any small wrinkle to this, because the Patriots are going to find a way to cheat, because that's what the Patriots do. You're seeing so many issues with people hacking Zoom meetings and things like that you think an NFL team's not trying to do that. Of course they're trying to do that. And the Patriots are the number 1 team to try to do that because they cheat.
Oh, we're getting some feedback here. Sorry, guys. We are continuing to do this broadcasting from afar, so things happen. So I'm hearing Kelly from like 20 seconds ago. So if you're hearing that too, our apologies. We'll figure it out here shortly. Anyway, so we move on. Yeah, I get some of the concerns with the timing and making your picks and doing a trade and that kind of stuff. The logistics of that make a lot of sense. But when it comes to some of the other stuff, now I'm hearing myself again. But no, when we get to that part of it, I understand. But the security issue, I think he's more concerned that people are going to spy, are going to have some ability to hear what they're doing, and I'm not sure that necessarily is something that I get.
Well, yeah, but like I said, they're paranoid to begin with. It's like you add any wrinkle to this, it's going to heighten it even worse. But yeah, like for me, it's not. Like I said, it's not so much. If you're working on a trade, trying to work on a trade with 2 or 3 people, this isn't like before where you've got. I know there's only 2 or 3 guys that are kind of the main components of this, but you had people on phones, you had people on. You had people doing other stuff. Now with everybody being in different spots, it's going to be that much harder to relay that information.
Am I hearing something that they said they were going to maybe do a practice run as well a few days before the draft? So let every team get on and kind of do a mock draft of their own and then kind of work out the kinks that way.
Well, yeah, they said they were going to do something like that, which I'd love to see what their mock draft would be like, because they're not going to draft actual
yeah.
So it's like, what are you doing? You drafting TV shows, you drafting movies, because
sure.
No team's going to be out there. Even if you're making up the name of football players, no team's still going to do that, because they'll be like, oh wait, they took a quarterback. Yeah, it's a fake quarterback, but that might mean they're leaning quarterback.
All right. Well, the draft should be interesting. I don't know. The one thing to me too, that before we move on and take a break here in a few minutes, is the fact that the draft was supposed to be here in Las Vegas, and of course because of all of this, the draft was taken away from Las Vegas, and it's supposed to be in Cleveland next year. But I don't understand why they don't just make the call and say, listen, Cleveland, we understand you were going to get it, but Las Vegas was going to get it, so we're just going to move everybody a year later. To say that it's going to be 2021 or 2022 till the draft can come back. I don't understand that piece of it, because with the extraordinary nature of things, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do.
I think they've already started the planning in Cleveland, right? Some of these things that you do have to plan maybe more than a year out. So they've already probably put some things in place for Cleveland already.
Well, yeah, but they did the same thing here with Las Vegas. It's not so much a year with the draft, as we know from what went down here. You have a few 6 to 8 months or so. So to me, yeah, Las Vegas planned for it too, and so did Cleveland. So I'm wondering why, just everybody just move a year later. Now you have extra time. Las Vegas was already ready to go, so all you got to do is roll that plan out again. So it'll be interesting. I don't know why they would do that. It's not like the Super Bowl, which is a whole different, like you said, Chaz. It takes so much time and so much effort. and you're talking about 18 to 24 months worth of planning, that to me makes more sense. But with the draft, I hope they make that choice. If not, and it comes back in 2022, that's fine too.
As long as we get another shot at it, it might be a little later than we thought, and it would have been nice with the first season and everything coming up. But as long as, Vegas gets a chance to showcase themselves as a city, which we do on many events every year, it's going to be fine. I don't think, it's not Vegas's fault this happened, but it's also not Cleveland's fault. So you're kind of punishing Cleveland for something they had no control over.
Yep.
Yeah, and Vegas is the ultimate destination, so I'm thinking it'll be here, once every decade, if not more.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see how that all goes down. But anyway, we're gonna step aside real quick and fix some of these audio issues that we're getting on our end. But when we come back, we're gonna bring on Josh Edwards. Josh is the NFL draft writer and also covers the SEC college football. And we will talk to him about the wide receiver position and what the Raiders may end up doing. You're listening to the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
From the number 1 pick to
All right, number 1. Stand by.
You found the most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Thanks for bringing us in your home, and a happy Easter. I got to wish everybody happy Easter out there. Hope you're having a good time and you also had a good Passover. We are now going to switch gears. We're going to talk about the Raiders, but we're also going to talk about the draft in general. And we go out now on the line and we bring in Josh Edwards, who is an NFL draft writer for CBSSports.com, also covers recruiting in the SEC. Welcome in, Josh. We appreciate you being here on Silver and Black today.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, so I wanted to start with a part of a story you wrote last week about teams that had some really desperate and pressing needs. One of those teams you mentioned, of course, was the Las Vegas Raiders and their need for a true number one wide receiver in this draft. The three names at the top of that list, of course, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs III. Knowing all of their strengths and weaknesses and the John Gruden offense, Josh, which one is the best fit and why do you believe?
Well, I keep going back to Jerry Jeudy because I think he's a pretty good I think he's got a lot of the traits that they're looking for. I mean, John Gruden, Mike Mayock, they've got this affinity for players that come from traditional programs, players that come from winning traditions, and not to say that CeeDee Lamb in Oklahoma have not produced a winning tradition, but Alabama, Clemson, what we've seen from them in recent years just has them a notch ahead of some of these other teams. So I look at Jerry Jeudy, the way that he's able to run his routes, the precision of which he does so, the program that he's coming out of. I think that's a great fit for what Las Vegas is trying to do at the position. I think he would be a great complement for Tyrell Williams. But at the same time, I think you can make a strong case for any of these guys because to me, CeeDee Lamb is slightly ahead for me as the number one wide receiver because his upside is a little bit higher. And then Henry Ruggs, I don't think anybody gives him enough credit for the route running, the attention to detail when it comes to his route running. Everybody knows his speed, but his route running is really good too. Of course, he comes from the Alabama program as well. And then you look what they tried to do in Oakland last year with Antonio Brown, so you kind of get an idea of maybe what kind of a mold they want in that kind of a position. So maybe Henry Ruggs is the guy. I think you can make a strong case for any of those three, but if I had to lean one, I would say Jerry Jeudy is probably the one that would take the edge a little bit for me.
I have to admit, even though we look at things objectively here on our show as well, Josh, I'm a Ruggs fan, and I don't know why. I think I know everybody's got positives and negatives, like I said, at this question as I posed it to you. But I love that kid. I think he's got some intangible. He's got some things you can't teach necessarily, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with them there. But when you look at who's ahead of them in that first round, you got to figure maybe at least one of those guys is gone, right?
It's a possibility. In a lot of scenarios, I end up coming away with the Raiders taking the first wide receiver off the board because I think the Jets are a possibility at number 11 overall. But at the same time, what we have seen from Joe Douglas in the past when he was at Philadelphia, they place a supreme need on filling out the wide or the offensive line unit before they focus on other programs. So I think offensive line is probably the favorites for what they will draft. I think they'll try to address that first. And because this is such a deep wide receiver class, they can feel comfortable knowing that they can get 2 or 3 quality wide receivers later in the draft. So they're one that I look at. You could possibly look at the Jaguars. I don't think there's much of a chance that one goes before Jacksonville's pick. So for me, it makes the most sense that the Raiders will have their pick of the litter, although there are 2 teams to varying degrees that I could theoretically see take a wide receiver depending on how the board falls.
Again, we're talking to Josh Edwards from CBS Sports. He's an NFL draft writer and also covers the SEC, and particularly Kentucky.
Yeah, it's it allows me to be able to get to know some of the best players in the country a little bit more closely because of my affiliation with the SEC and covering the NFL draft as well. There's actually a prop bet going around about whether there's going to be more SEC players taken in the first round or whether there's going to be more players from all other conferences combined being taken in the first round. So a lot of talent coming out of the SEC, and this past year was no different.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Now, if Josh, if the Raiders, for whatever reason, and again, I really believe in my heart of hearts that at 12 and at worst at 19 that they grab one of those guys as long as they're there. But if you look at the receivers past those top three, start looking maybe 4 through 8 or 4 through 10, because we keep hearing how deep of a class it is. But in that next tier of receivers, guys like Justin Jefferson, who you're well familiar with, LSU, or Denzel Mims from Baylor, are any of those guys maybe going to play a surprise role and become, with hard work, one of those number one guys in the NFL, or you think that's a bridge too far?
No, I think Justin Jefferson has that capability. He's great down the field. He's pretty elusive after the catch. Pretty good route runner. He can operate outside or in the slot, so I think you get a little bit of flexibility there. I can envision a scenario where, maybe Las Vegas looks to target him with their second first-round pick and waits to see what happens at number 12. Maybe a guy like Derek Brown falls. Maybe a guy like Jeff Okudah falls. Isaiah Simmons, I know they addressed the linebacker position pretty heavily in free agency, but you look at a talent like Isaiah Simmons, he's pretty hard to ignore as well. So if for whatever reason one of those players were to fall to number 12, which I don't think is likely, I think you have to consider those positions as well. Maybe you even look at a guy like Javon Kinlaw, the defensive tackle from South Carolina, at number 12, and then possibly get a guy like Justin Jefferson at 19. I think he's got the highest upside as a potential number one wide receiver immediately. He's probably the only other wide receiver that I would feel comfortable with saying is capable of being a number one wide receiver the minute that he steps onto, team headquarters for whichever team selects him. That would be the fourth of those four guys. So I could envision a scenario where, Las Vegas sits tight at number 12, maybe take the best player available there and just see what kind of happens after that. Because if they don't take a wide receiver at number 12, then maybe the position starts getting pushed down a little bit. You've got San Francisco at 14 or 13. You've got Denver at 15. Those teams could look to take a wide receiver. Maybe Philadelphia looks to jump up somewhere. So you have to be aware of the teams after Las Vegas's pick that could take a wide receiver. But at the same time, you're trying to maximize your draft capital. So if you can get a supreme player with your first round pick and still get a wide receiver, I think that's an ideal scenario.
Hey, Josh, it's Kelly. You cover Kentucky football, so you got to see a lot of Lynn Bowden this year. He's being called the Taysom Hill of this draft, which if you listen to the show, you know how much I have an affinity for Taysom Hill. But is this going to be something we hear every year where we get that kind of gadgety quarterback who's going to be getting a bump up because people want to turn him into the next Taysom Hill?
I think it's certainly a possibility. This is a copycat league. So when one team sees another team doing something with success, they're going to try to mimic that. I mean, that is going to force defenses to play honest. You've got to respect his ability to throw the ball as much as his ability to pass the ball. So that makes things difficult. You probably don't want him to be your, 3-down quarterback. But I think that does give you a little bit of a competitive advantage when you have a player on the field like that, because it enables you to stretch the field so much more. So I can see that being the new trend here soon, especially as we look to the college level. There's so many more talented athletic players playing that position that, it just naturally translates to the NFL. So I could see that becoming a trend. I do think it's a trend. I don't think it's something that we're going to see long term, that it's something teams are going to try to do for a long time. I think it'll probably, slowly work itself out of the game as teams adapt. But as far as Lynn is concerned, I've heard the Taysom Hill comparisons quite a bit. I don't necessarily love them because honestly, I don't fear him as a passer. I know he's completed a few passes, but just watching his games, there's really nothing. He's more of like an Antoine Randall L. Like, you're more comfortable with him in a gadget kind of scenario where maybe he'll be able to complete a pass downfield occasionally, but you don't want to have those quarterback type of expectations placed upon him where, he might be able to do that consistently. So I love his elusiveness. I love what he can do in space. He can, help you out as a kick returner, a punt returner. I mean, he's a great, phenomenal athlete, whether he's going to play at running back or wide receiver. But I just hate to put those Taysom Hill comparisons on him because I think Taysom Hill is a much better passer than Lynn is.
Josh, one last question before we let you go here in a couple minutes, and that has to do with a non-Raiders related question, but I have to ask because covering the draft, I mean, the talk of this week was, of course, Tua's pro day, quote, I'll put air quotes around that one, pro day, and the medical concerns there. In your view and through your NFL sources that you talked to, do you still think he's going to go in the top 10, or has there been enough, even with his intangibles and how good he is there enough doubt now, and especially with the way this draft is going to be conducted and the fact that teams haven't been able to be there with him in person and have their medical staff evaluate him, do you think he falls? Is there any way he falls out of the top 10?
I think it's a very minute possibility. I put together a pretty all-inclusive article for what we've heard and what we know about Tua to this point for CBS Sports early this week. There's a lot of trust that comes into this because you have to trust the doctors that are dealing with him on a daily basis. You have to trust, the coaches that were putting him through that drill. I'm sure those coaches have better relationships with certain teams. And that's probably going to allow the process to go a little bit smoothly for those specific teams, whereas other teams might have a little bit more doubt because they're not as familiar with those guys. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but at the end of the day, I have a hard time envisioning him fall out of the top 10, specifically as some of the doubt that we saw come out this past week. I thought it was interesting that it was coming from some people that have backgrounds, from Miami, and it came out of the Miami Sentinel, I think is where it originated. So you kind of question the origin of the actual article, because Miami does stand to benefit if they don't have to give up any draft capital and are able to take him at number 5 overall. So I think that has to be consideration. I'm not saying anybody's right or anybody's wrong. I think you just have to be aware of the context when you're making this kind of a decision. I like to say that it doesn't, you don't have to have 32 teams that value him as a top 10 or a top 5 pick. It only takes one. And we've seen that happen several times in the past with teams that just fall in love with bad quarterbacks and they take them in the first round. I mean, it happens on almost an annual basis. Not that Tua is a bad quarterback. I think he's a great quarterback when healthy, but you see the kind of love affairs that certain teams develop with a player. So it only takes one of those teams to make that leap.
That's right. Josh Edwards, talented NFL draft writer at CBSSports.com. Josh, we'll talk to you on down the road. Thanks, my friend.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Josh Edwards, again, check him out, CBSSports.com. Great writer. We're going to step aside when we come back. Our interview with Michael Lombardi, former Raiders front office executive, general manager of the Cleveland Browns. How did the Raiders do in free agency, and what does it mean for their draft? Coming up next here on the Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases.
No, this
sponsored by the Nevada Army National Guard, aired by the Nevada Broadcasters Association and this station.
23 million veterans, their heroes. .org.
CBS Sports Radio.
This is Mark Bedane, president of the Raiders. You're listening to Silver and Black Today.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And we got on the line now. We bring in our good friend, Michael Lombardi. Of course, Michael, former general manager, front office executive with the Raiders and the Cleveland Browns, and, of course, the New England Patriots, working there with Coach Belichick, who, by the way, wrote the forward of his great book. If you don't have it, go pick it up on Amazon. You're sitting at home now. You have all this time, right? Go get this book. It is one of the best football books you will ever read. It is called Gridiron Genius. You can pick it up on Amazon.com. All right, Michael. So listen, here we are amidst all of this COVID-19 crisis and everybody staying at home and doing what we're doing. The NFL draft, it's coming up. This is one of the favorite times of the year, I know, for you, for all of us who cover the sports. But is it me, or are these reports about teams, GMs, coaches being concerned with technology and the format and all that? Is that being a little bit overblown based on what you've done and being in that chair when you're getting ready for draft day?
Well, I mean, look, it's a logistics issue, there's no doubt. And, I think it's going to allow people to really have a smaller circle of people that are going to be involved, which might be a really good thing. And let's face it, the draft really comes down to 2 or 3 people that make the decision. It's not always about all the people in the room. And I think that this is one of those where you can really eliminate, not that you want to eliminate the scouts, but the scouts have done their homework. They've done it. They've all gone through it. And now it's time to make the decision. So I think you got to really narrow your scope and do a lot of dress rehearsals. I think the key really is going to be making sure you've got all the information on trades and that you're in constant contact with the coach or whomever else is analyzing the trade and where you want to go. And that, to me, is going to be the critical component.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting. And I know a lot of people are trying to guess, will there be less trades, more trades? Obviously, most, I think, people are saying less just because the communications will be a little bit different. But that doesn't necessarily mean we won't see them. Now, when you look at this draft, Michael, I know you wrote about this a little bit recently up on The Athletic. And when you look at how it's going to happen, what's going to be done here, relying on the scouting, relying on the film, not being able to meet these guys like they usually would running up to the draft. Is this going to be a time when we truly see the organizations that are built well, that have their stuff together versus those that are not?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. And I think it's also going to reveal who and there's a lot of organizations that, have people that ultimately make the decision, but they're not out there in the public. They're not out there in the open. They kind of hide behind the scenes. And I think it's going to really reveal a little bit of that. And look, most organizations, it comes down to 2 or 3 people need to make the decision, the code, however you set it up. In Oakland, it's going to come down to what Gruden wants to do. Obviously, Mayock's going to have an influence. But in other places, in San Francisco, it's going to come down to what Kyle Shanahan wants to do. John Lynch will have an influence. Up in Seattle, it'll be John Snyder. Pete Carroll's going to have an influence. And I think those 3 people, 4 people, whoever, they need to be in constant contact, really spend a lot of time, 3 or 4 days before the draft, making sure they're all on the same page.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating. Of course, here in Las Vegas, we're so disappointed that we aren't able to host it. That was going to be kind of our big unveiling, if you will, as an NFL market. And I know we'll get it back. It would be great if the NFL would maybe just move everything back a year and have it here next year, but we'll see what they do. Now, switching to the Raiders. Now, going up to the draft, the Raiders were active in free agency, really focused on the middle of their defense, which has been a great weakness, as you know, for a long time. They bring in Corey Littleton, they bring in Nick Kwiatkowski, Demarius Randall, Jeff Heath, Malik Collins up front, which I think was a sneaky good sign. What do you think about what Mayock and Gruden have been able to do leading into the draft and free agency?
Well, I think it tells you they're going to go offense. I think it tells you they're going to go skill players, because I think when you look at their team, they signed Kwiatkowski, they signed Littleton, they've got guys there that they like. They could use another corner, but I think the way they're going to play defense, it may lend you to believe that maybe they will take a corner in a later round. They drafted a second round last year. Mullen, he's got to be a good player for them. So, for me, just by looking at him on the surface, I think it tells me that you're going to see skill players come off the board. I think Gruden's going to want to get a receiver that can make plays down the field for him. Certainly they signed Witten as the backup tight end. I think when you look at the football team, receiver, the position receiver jumps out at you. So I think that's really where they're going to go.
Well, and Michael, speaking of that, back when you worked for Al Davis and you talked about how Al Davis obsessed and thought about daily inside the division, inside the AFC West. And you and I have talked many times here on this show about how the Raiders have to look at Kansas City, right? They have to look at Patrick Mahomes. They have to look at what they're doing with their division foe. How are the Raiders progressing on addressing those needs, addressing what they need to do in order to put that target on what is the best team right now in the division, and that's Kansas City?
Well, I mean, I think their answer to you would be, look, Littleton can really run. He could tackle Mahomes. Kwiatkowski can play smart. They signed Nesbitt, the unrestricted free agent from the kid who was in Hard Knocks with the Browns, and then went on and actually had a good couple of years down in Tampa Bay. They've got Farrell, the kid they drafted the 4th pick overall in the draft. I mean, so they're sitting there saying, look, they signed Malik Collins. They got T.J. Hall from last year. They've got a lot of guys up front that you're going to need to be able to go after them, but they're going to need to match them point for point. And I think they need, as what John would say, we need some juice, and they need their Tyreek Hill, and they don't, Nelson Aguilar isn't going to give them the juice that Gruden's going to create. Zay Jones isn't. I mean, the more they're around the program, the less likely they'll be, really endear themselves to the program. So, look, it's a critical year for the Raiders. I mean, they've won 11 games in 2 years. They got to stay healthy. They've got to shore up their team. But you could just see that strategy-wise, I mean, they've spent some money. I mean, they started out with about $80 million of cap room. Now they've gone way down. So to me, this opens it up that Gruden wants to get receivers. I mean, that's what he's about. He loves receivers, and I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to draft them.
Again, we're talking to Michael Lombardi about NFL draft and particularly what the Raiders are up to. And you mentioned at the top of this when we talked about their free agency moves this year, Michael, building that middle of the defense, which has been so weak for so long. And you mentioned skill players, obviously wide receiver, sitting there with the 12th pick. Everyone seems to believe, as you just underscored again, that Gruden will want to get a skill position guy with those top 3 wide receivers. You look at CeeDee Lamb, you look at Jerry Jeudy, and you look at Henry Ruggs III. I'm a guy who likes Ruggs. Maybe that's the ghost of Al Davis speaking in my ear. But you talked about Tyreek Hill. You talked about that kind of guy, which allows you to scheme differently on the field. Is there one of these 3 guys that you think is a better fit? They're all 3 very talented players, but is there one guy you think fits better for this team?
I think that, when you break down what you got to be able to do in John's offense is you got to be able to run slants. You got to be tough. You got to go inside, right? You got to be able to make plays in the middle of the defense, and you also got to be able to challenge the outside part of the field. Do I think Jeudy will be there for them when it comes time to pick? I think I'm not sure of that. I don't know how the receiver board's all going to come out, in terms of who's all going to go and how they have them all rated. There's a lot of receivers this year in the draft that are really good players. And I think that when you break them down, you could easily get as good a receiver with their second one as you could. But I would have a hard time thinking that if CeeDee Lamb, the guy who's really dynamic with the ball in his hand, if he were available, I'd have a hard time thinking they should pass him up.
Yeah, great. It's a great. They're going to have great options, which is fantastic. Now that number 19 pick, Michael. Again, they could go cornerback there, or they might trade down. Consensus seems to believe that maybe they're going to try to trade down. Of course, you always have to have a partner get there to go back into the second round and still be able to get a cornerback. Is there a guy in that cornerback position like a C.J. Henderson? Who else do you think might be a good fit for Las Vegas as they build that defense out?
Well, I mean, the one thing you got to understand is when you look at the way they play defense, and you look at Paul and the way he coaches and what he's always done, Gunther, he's always kind of had a certain style of corner that he likes. He likes long arms. He likes length. I think when you really break it down, I mean, do I think Jalen do I think that when you look at it like a kid like Jalen Johnson, or, it's gonna be somebody like a C.J. Henderson who's tall, who's athletic, who can do multiple things. He played in Todd Grantham's team. I think that's what you're going to see. You need to have range. You need to have length. It's really challenging when you go match up against those receivers for Kansas City. If you don't have range and you don't have length, it's a real problem.
Yeah, fantastic. No, agreed. And before we let you go, Michael, clearly everyone's guessing now, and public health has to be first, right? That's what we're all focused on, making sure. That's why we're all staying home and doing what we need to do. But when you look at this upcoming NFL season, do you see any scenario where they don't play the full season?
Again, I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. I hope that's not the case. I know this living close to the epicenter up in New York, where it's going on. We're seeing a flattening of the curve, which is important. And I think once we get through the flattening of the curve, then I think we can go forward to see where we're going. But until we get there, it's hard. I do think we'll have football at some point. When, I don't know.
Great. No, I think that's where everybody's at. Michael Lombardi, I appreciate, as always, you joining us here. You can make sure you follow Michael on Twitter. And, again, pick up his book, Gridiron Genius. Fantastic read for these times. Michael, thanks again, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to step aside. When we come back, the Silver and Black Today rolls on here on CBS Sports Radio 11.
we wouldn't be able to hear you.
Well,
stand by.
The only way to take Silver and Black Today with you is with a radio.com app. Download it today and search CBS Sports
Okay.
Radio 1140.
It's at 1%.
And listen to us anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140 in Las Vegas. We appreciate you guys being here as always. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's always good to talk Raider football, and we want to thank our guests thus far, including Michael Lombardi and Josh Edwards. And guys, you know, we just heard Michael talk about the Raiders and the wide receiver. We also talked about it with Josh. Tell me what you guys think. I mean, are you still, as much as I love Henry Ruggs III, to me, if he's there, for some reason, I feel like CeeDee Lamb might be the guy that the Raiders, from everything I'm reading, from everything I'm seeing, might be the better fit. Kelly, what do you think about those guys? I mean, all three of them to me are good players. They all have positives, negatives, and we rank them a little bit differently. But when it comes to perfect fit and maybe where the draft may end up if it goes the way we think it will, what do you think about wide receiver and who ends up in the Silver and Black?
I think it's going to be between Judy and Lamb, and if one person, like, I could see the Jets definitely going either one of those guys as well, or I could see him going tackle. So it's possible the Raiders could have their pick. I've been a Jerry Jeudy guy from last year. I think he's a better route runner than Lamb. You know, everybody talks about how good CeeDee Lamb is after the catch, but when you play in the Big 12 and you got 15 yards of space to run and make plays, I mean, that's a little easier to do that. You know, if you put Jerry Jeudy on Oklahoma, I think he's got a better year than Lamb. You know, so just personal preference. You know, I like the fact that Jeudy can get separation on anybody, is the best route runner I've ever seen in college football. I'd like to pair that with Carr. But like you're saying, if he's gone or they choose Lamb, it's not like there's a big drop-off. You're still getting a premium talent in any of those two guys or any of the three if you throw Ruggs in there.
Yeah, exactly what Kelly's saying with the personal preference. That's what Josh Edwards said in the first interview you did. It just comes down to what Gruden and Mayock think of these. You know, if they have the pick of the litter and all three of those guys are there, you know, you might like, you know, Scott, you probably like CeeDee Lamb better. You know, Kelly just said he likes Jeudy. Whatever Gruden and Mayock, they're going to break it down individually, and it's just going to come down to that personal preference, like Kelly said.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, if you look at these guys too, and their skill sets, right? I mean, they're all, like I said in the interview with Michael, they're all great receivers. They're all guys, I think, that if you're a Raiders fan, you would be happy with any one of them. And like I said, I have a partial. I like Henry Ruggs III, and you joked him being Hayward Bay, Kelly, the other day with me, but because of the speed factor there and the fact that I said you can't teach speed, and again, he does have issues, especially when it comes to concern with durability and things like that. But I think things like numbers of receptions and all that stuff, that can be misleading. A lot of fans get caught up in that, and if that was the case, necessarily you wouldn't have drafted Josh Jacobs either.
Yeah, I'm not worried about production from Ruggs for the pure and simple reason there are 4 guys on Alabama's wide receiving core last year that will be number 1 draft picks, because you're going to see the other 2 next year will be first rounders. So, I mean, there's just only so many balls to go around. I don't care how good you are or whatever. And half the games that Tua played in, he wasn't even in the fourth quarter. So you're just trying to kill the game at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at his numbers too there, again, number 3 in touchdowns, and out of every 4.1 catches he had, it was a touchdown. So he's able to score, he's able to get open. But for some reason, I don't know what it is. I just think CeeDee Lamb. I think Jeudy may be gone, maybe not. As Michael said, it could end up that way. But either way, I think these guys are all going to be beneficial if the Raiders do go 12. I just can't see them not going wide receiver at 12 unless something happens in the draft before them and guys drop down, because the landscape changes and suddenly you have 2 or 3 of them, or 3 of them available, which is going to be hard to believe. But either way, I think that you got to do it. You signed so much defense during the offseason, during that free agency period that we just saw the Raiders go through. So to me, you have to address the greatest need on offense now, which is really the one need is wide receiver. And of course you still need cornerback, which we're going to talk about later in the show with Kelly as we break down that whole cornerback position and what it means for the Raiders for that one. But I also, I appreciated both interviews and them talking about the kind of format of the draft and how things are going to go. And really, guys, we're going to learn which teams have their stuff together based on these challenges that are thrown at them.
Yeah, you mentioned they need a cornerback, they need a wide receiver, but to me, they need a number one wide receiver. They may not need a number one corner.
Right.
Mullen could be that number one corner. We don't know yet, but they know for a fact they don't have a number one wide receiver on the roster. So to me, that bumps up wide receiver over corner as the draft need.
Right.
Yeah.
So getting back to the draft, like what you're talking about with Michael Lombardi, what we talked about in the opening of the show, there's only 2 or 3 people that really make the decisions in the draft, and like Michael said, this is going to kind of reveal the decision makers. When I was working in the front office, it was the owner and the general manager that made the decisions, and now we see with the Raiders that it's Gruden and Mayock that are making the decisions. So really, I feel like the Raiders do have a little bit of an advantage, kind of doing it with a skeleton crew like they did last year, and so they might have a leg up on this whole situation, and hopefully, comes out with another magical draft.
They might just have that leg up. We'll see. All right, we're going to step aside for a break here, top of the hour sports update. When we come back, actor Lee Arenberg, a member of Raider Nation, huge Raider fan, and you remember him?
Hello, Poppy.
That's right, Pirates of the Caribbean. He'll be with us. He'll talk about his Raider fandom and his career. Of great conversation here on the Silver and Black Today, only on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Good morning. This is Mark over at CBS Sports Radio in Las Vegas. How you doing?
What's up, brother? How you doing, man? How's your day?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I have Scott, Kelly, and Chaz. They're going to be on the line momentarily. Just turn the phone on, Trent. Stand by.
We've got your Raiders covered.
Knock on wood if you're with me.
It's Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And now, here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of the Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. We are excited to talk with our next guest, who I know you all know well, a gifted actor, a card-carrying member of Raider Nation, best known for his roles as the pirate Pintel in Pirates of the Caribbean, as well as his recent run as Grumpy. That's right, Grumpy in the hit TV series Once Upon a Time, and his memorable roles, at least for me, in several Star Trek series, and one of my favorites, Seinfeld as Mike the Bookie. Love that parking spot episode, by the way. Mr. Lee Arenberg. Lee, welcome to the Silver and Black today, my friend.
Good morning, Raider Nation. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Well, we appreciate it, and I want to jump right in, and I know we have a good amount of time to talk to you today. We're all trapped, right? So, but it's good because there's yeah, that's right. I love it though, man. It's great to be able to talk to you. You have such an amazing and dynamic career, and of course the Raider fandom we'll get to as well. But as we start the show, we first have to get, just to set up people, and I know a lot of our listeners and viewers were really excited about having you on. How did you become a Raider fan? What was the kind of genesis of you becoming that member of Raider Nation?
Well, you know what? I mean, I'm an LA kid. I grew up in LA, and so really it was the LA Raiders that sold me for like do or die, Silver and Black for life. I'd always been a fan of kind of the aggression of the squad, but it was that 1981 Super Bowl, like right before they moved to LA. I was at UCLA doing theater, and I was watching that Super Bowl game in a dressing room while a show was on stage. And when we scored a touchdown, it might have even been Kenny King going to the house. I screamed and we went nuts, and we got in big trouble for it. And that hooked me, bro.
Oh, that would, man. What a great game. And Kenny's son, Kenny King Jr., good guy and a friend of the show as well. And I'm sure he's listening and appreciates you mentioning Dad there. Now, you talk about that, and you mentioned UCLA. You mentioned growing up an LA kid. Of course, you went to Santa Monica High School, and we'll talk about who you went to high school with in a little bit. But you've had that acting bug since you were a young guy, and you come out of Santa Monica. Of course, Sean Penn, Emilio Estevez, Robert Downey Jr. These are guys that you went to school with. You must have had one hell of a drama department.
We really did, actually. I mean, that's the truth. Yeah, the high school theater. Yeah, a lot of. I mean, I'm like the world's oldest brat packer for real. Because like it's taken me 40 years for guys to like, hey, you're pretty good, man. But that's just the thing about a character actor's career. The trajectory is a little bit, takes a little longer. And then when they finally go, hey, Seinfeld was good, Star Trek was good, man, Pirates was good, it adds up. And so, yeah, many blessings. My family wasn't in the business. So even though I grew up in the shadow of the studio and surrounded by the movie stars, man, it was a million-mile journey just to get invited to the party, for sure.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a tough business. It always has been. And I think, for me, one of the hallmarks of a great actor overall is being versatile, right? So you have played so many different roles, that span and range, that'd be tough for some. How did you develop that versatility that has helped you have this great career that you've had?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like I started in the theater. So when I did a lot of theater in high school, and then when I went to UCLA, I started a theater company called the Actors Gang with my buddies at UCLA and a lot of other kind of real famous. Tim Robbins, he was kind of like my older brother in college, and he was kind of the leading force and took his early movie star money and invested it back in his fellow artists. And out of our theater company came Jack Black, Kyle Gass. The band Tenacious D started in our theater. Kyle was my old roommate. So, I mean, I think it's also just, the people you surround yourself with, the level of competition. And I think that really helped me. Being into sports actually helped my acting career because, you run a basketball game, you're trying your hardest. And at the end of the game, it's like, all right, let's run it back. Win or lose, you still get the experience. And so, a lot of acting is the rejection, the audition process. But how do you stay focused and eyes on the prize maybe when you're not getting that first or second opportunity? And so I think you just got to be driven, man. You have to want it. I would say, people say, what advice do you have for young actors? I say, don't do it. But if that doesn't convince you not to, welcome to the club. That's a crazy driven dude,
Oh yeah. Again, we're talking to Lee Arenberg, great actor, and of course Raiders fan. And Lee, you bring up acting and sports together. Just like you said, being a character actor, and I remember Humphrey Bogart started as a character actor, right? One of the best ever. And you look at sports too, and I think that's where we know those guys that get the covers of People magazine and all that kind of stuff, just like they get the cover of Sports Illustrated. But it's the guys who are working constantly. And as an actor, for you, you've had all these types of roles and you've made a great life for yourself and a great career for yourself by being that versatile. But there's always roles that you like and always roles that kind of help you grow as an athlete. If you're, let's say, a backup player or you're a player who's playing on the offensive line versus quarterback. For you, are there roles that really had that type of impact on you in your career?
Well, for sure. I mean, listen, I always see myself as like, I want them to give me the ball. Like I use sports, philosophy really for a lot of the acting. It's like I'm a third down back, I'm that kind of like I'm a nickel D back or something. I come in, they don't always need character actors, but when they need you badly. Your contribution is that little bit of flavor. It's the cherry on the sundae. And you got to believe in yourself before. That's how people believe in you. If you're out there and you want to have a dream as a musician, in radio, in any of the arts, in any business really, believe in yourself. And that faith will open those doors magically because that's how people believe in you. And I got a strong energy about me. Obviously, I'm intense, and it's just that, like, I was too short-balled and crazy to be playing in the NFL. I had to go acting. That was my chance,
Again, we're talking to Lee Arenberg, actor and Raiders fan. And Lee, the role of Pintel in the three Pirates of the Caribbean movies you were part of, that role too, I think is a great example. Not only does it fit so well with you being a Raider fan and it being a pirate movie, but that role adds so much to that film. Of course, you have the Johnny Depp role and all that stuff, and how much time and effort and focus that role takes in the movie, and of course the other great actors you were with it too. But that role, I think that's a great example of what you're talking about. Is when it's third down and you get the ball, you need to take it over that goal line, and that's what you're able to do. How much fun was it working on those movies?
Oh my God! Seriously, we lived in the Caribbean for 2 years. I got to take a speedboat to work and hang with Keira Knightley all day. So I mean, it was pretty sweet. Honestly, it was a lucky break because all the roles were cast in London. The primary casting started there because there was no America. So English characters, the pirate world was prior to the modern day America. So I got real lucky, and that's why I say, my break was they couldn't find that short, bald, and crazy in London. And they came looking to Hollywood, and I won that lotto. But
Nice.
This is for all you pirate fans out there. Here's a good one. Hello, Poppy.
I love
so
it.
I got my little catchphrase, and you know what though? It's all about like I say, when they give you that chance in our business, you got to go for it. We're the only business where a 70% completion rating isn't good enough. We have to be 100%. They give you a laugh line, you get a laugh with it. And so acting is 1,000% business. You got to have a perfect. That's the execution that we're shooting for. And so it's very tied into sports. We want to execute those first 15 plays, start this play strong, start this movie strong. And it's a team effort. There were 1,000 people on the crew daily on Pirates. Marine guys, safety, caterers, construction, the grips, the electrics, right? The actors, we're the beneficiaries of everyone's effort. So it's an ultimate team sport. Making movies, making TV is team sport.
Well, and I have to over the air tell you hello from our good friend Andrea Villapiano, Phil Villapiano's daughter. Kelly's her.
Villapiano, Kelly. Shout out to Andrea and Phil. Andrea welcomed me into kind of Raider Nation social media, and now I have a lot of Raider fans that are following, and awesome people from the heart. And obviously number 41. I mean, who wouldn't want to wear a 41 jersey, bro?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, that doesn't. We have dubbed him here on our show, and we take full credit for it. We have dubbed him the honorary new mayor of Las Vegas. So when he comes out, I told him, and Phil said, hey, when I get out there, we all the three of us, the guys on the show here, and him got to sit down and have a beer, and I can't wait to do that when the stadium opens.
Oh my God, I'm jumping up at my carriage.
Oh yeah, you got to be there, man. You got to be there. Yeah. But Lee, one thing, we're going to go to break here in a few minutes, but Andrea and I started talking because we're both huge Seinfeld fans, and you were in 2 episodes, but they're 2 very well-known episodes, playing Mike, right? Mikey the bookie,
the worst bookie in the world.
Yeah, exactly. But those kind of roles too, when you get the opportunity, you talk about taking opportunity and running with it, to get in a show at that time like Seinfeld for you too, that had to be big as well, right?
That was huge, dude. I was a relatively young guy at the time. And I mean, TV has changed so much because back in the day, that's the 90s. That first show I did would have been 93 maybe. Mm-hmm. And 40 million people would watch that Thursday night on NBC. Crazy. And so the impact, I got a standing ovation at the dog park, man, the next day. It was pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. The dog park. Never where you think you're going to get your adulation, right? But you get it there. Anyway, all right, listen, Lee, we're going to
dog park, right?
That's there you go. Full of actors, right? That's good. Appreciation of good work. All right, Lee, we're going to put you on hold here. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we'll get more into Raider football, get your views on where they're headed, the move to Las Vegas, and more. Again, we're being joined by Lee Arenberg, of course, the actor and great Raiders fan, and he'll stay with us coming into the next segment. You're listening to The Silver and Black today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
who need our help.
I learned myself that when you experience something like this, it's so traumatic, you can't do it alone.
Support our wounded warriors and their families at fisherhouse.org.
CBS Sports Radio. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Appreciate you guys joining us on your Easter Sunday. Hope you're all having a good day and getting a little bit of a respite listening and talking some Raiders football. And our special guest today, you would know him very well seeing him. And if you're watching our video feed, we got Lee Arenberg with us. And Lee is a great actor and a huge Raiders fan. Know him from Seinfeld, Star Trek, although lots of makeup in Star Trek, and also, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean. And Lee, before I get to this question I have for you, we had one of the guys on our YouTube feed said that you need to be on the sideline dressed in your Pintel character and become a Raiders institution.
I got my
on the
face
sideline.
paint on right now, so I'm ready, bro. Bring me.
Yeah, a lot of comments about
it.
hey.
Through and through. There's nowhere I'd rather be like watching the game than in the black hole. I think that is one of the great. We're the most misunderstood fans in the world. We look like badasses, but they're the biggest sweethearts in the world.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've learned that because I did not grow up a Raider fan. I grew up 110 miles south from where you did in San Diego, so it was the opposite where I grew up. But I'll tell you, amazing people since I've been doing this show, and we've had the website now for 3 years. Amazing, and by far the best fans there are in all of sports, in my view. But you think about Raider football, Lee, and it's been a long few decades for the franchise. You know, you talked about being in college and that 81 and then of course the 83 season, all that greatness that was the Raiders, and including losing Al Davis in 2011. As a fan, how tough has that been for you not to see them where they once were?
It's brutal, dude. It's brutal. I mean, the thing about us, I mean, myself as a Raiders fan is I'm myopic. Every year it's Super Bowl. That's my prediction every year. So, you know, it's even and I'm a pretty good sports handicapper, but I'm still when it comes to my Raider football, it's like, it's just win, baby, nothing else. It's like, if we don't have that commitment to excellence in the Raider tradition, that's really what the program for me is, why I love the squad. It's like, once a Raider, always a Raider. I just love all that. And, you know, I think that the turning point for our squad, I feel like we're coming around. Obviously, this draft is huge. But, yeah, it's tough. I'll tell you a good story. On the first Pirates, we started shooting in 2002, and we were in the Caribbean in 2003 for that Super Bowl against Tampa Bay. So it's an all-Pirate Super Bowl, and I'm making the Pirate movie. And I'll tell you something, dude. Watching that game in St. Vincent in the Caribbean, trust me, dude, we were all the Raider fans were drinking by halftime. That was a rough one, and it's been a rough 10 years, bro.
Hey, Lee, it's Chaz. We all have Raider friends and kind of friends that like other teams, and we kind of give the business back and forth with. You talk about all these incredible actors that you kind of grew into the business with. Who do you talk to most? You know, who do you give the most football trash with?
Wow. You know, it's right. Like, that's a good question, man. I tell you something. A lot of my buds, I mean, I know so many New Yorkers. It's hard to say. I think I do most of my BSing with producers, you know, guys that can actually hire you. Like, who cares about the other actors? I want to schmooze the producers who can give me the gig. Yeah, I don't know. People know I'm do or die Raider, and it's been some rough seasons. It's funny. I consider everyone else super bandwagon. Like, I'll have actor friends that they grew up in Dallas, but they like Kansas City, and then when Green Bay's good, they like the Pack. I'm like, I love my team, win or lose. Yeah, we have the best colors. Obviously, I'm a Pirate for life, so Yeah, I'll give the BS to anyone though, bro. If they started out.
I love it. And yeah, I mean, let's jump ahead now, Lee, because the Raiders, they decide, of course, unfortunately for the folks in Oakland, but it benefits us. We're based in Las Vegas, so obviously we're happy about the relocation. And they come here, they decide they're bringing John Gruden back. Mike Mayock comes in. They really look to have that ship turned in the right direction. What do you think so far in going into year 3 about the job they're doing and kind of getting that swagger back?
Well, I think it's starting to happen. Obviously, we had such a great start last season. In fact, I am like such a sports guy, and this the Corona the experience is no bueno for us sports fans with no live stuff. The NFL draft is the only event on the schedule that's legit, right?
Yeah,
I'm actually watching, like, in my background noise for this is Red Zone Channel 24/7, So actually, I think I'm watching week 7 right now is in the background, and I think it was a good week for us. I see some Darren Waller with 2 touchdowns and 134 yards. I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good week. We're definitely heading in the right direction. I guarantee it. A little more consistency in getting that ball downfield. Obviously, this draft, if we get our big hawks at the wide receiver, which is key, and improve the D. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and if you look at this current roster, right? I mean, we as fans, I think we always look at our teams, and there's a couple. You like the whole team, of course, but there's a couple of guys who appeal to you. Is there somebody that appeals to you, and as a guy that you just love watching?
Yeah, well, it's Josh Jacobs, no question.
Yeah.
And I'm a fantasy football guy too for many years, so I snagged that sucker way early, and my guys in my league were like, "What are you doing, wasting a 5th round?" I was like, "Because I know what's coming." And his story is so great, and I'm down with his father, and just like the ability for people to kind of overcome their adversity. That's the triumph of sports for me. The way out of the poverty that he experienced. I mean, that story makes me cry when I see it, and so for his success, he's my number 1 right now on the squad. I love him. But boy, it was great to be on Hard Knocks. I really learned this squad. I loved how that Hard Knocks came out, and I'm knocking on some wood if you can hear me.
I love it. Again, we're talking to actor Lee Arenberg, of course, Pirates of the Caribbean fame, Once Upon a Time, you name it, Seinfeld, Star Trek, you name it. He's been everywhere and done an amazing job. And Lee, when you look at this team too, clearly coming to Las Vegas, I know from your social media too, you were up in Oakland last season. You see some games up there. With them being closer, of course, as an actor, your schedule can be nuts. But with them being a little bit closer, you anticipate coming up and catching some games here in Las Vegas since it's a little closer?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and also the great thing too is I'll go see them at the SoFi when they're going against the Chargers or if they play the Rams. I will travel. I mean, that's the great thing too about the Raider Nation. It's like we represent in every stadium in America. And for sure, I'm excited that the new kind of like Death Star or whatever we're calling Allegiant Stadium. It looks rad, dude. I mean, I've been watching the building of it and all the videos, and it's gorgeous looking. And I think Vegas is a fine spot for it. It's a city that'll attract. Obviously, it's going to be a hot ticket. But I think it's a smart move for them. I'm hoping it all works out. Obviously, I think that Mark Davis seems to be pushing us in the right direction, and we need a good stadium. We're a sexy brand, and I think, obviously we're bringing swagger to Vegas in a way that it's exciting. It's Raider Nation. It doesn't matter where we play. We're Raiders.
That's right. That's the point. And the two most. Actually, there's 3 names, kind of nicknames for the stadium. We'll see which one sticks, right? Which is, you mentioned one, Death Star. The other is the Al, because it's Allegiant Stadium, right? So it makes sense to call it the Al Davis thing there as well.
Love that.
But the third one that's gaining in popularity, I even saw somebody's made a T-shirt out of it, is they're calling it the Black Pearl.
Whoa,
So,
I'm down.
yeah.
All right.
So So I'm thinking, well, that's what I'm thinking, Lee. I'm thinking that the Raiders need to pick that one and then get you in a spot. You're an actor. They can hire you, right? Have you come down here and they could do some really creative stuff. And I'm hoping that, they even though the new Al Davis torch is going to be massive and beautiful inside the stadium, they're still going to have people light it and so on. So I'm hoping that you get that opportunity because it would be great. And whether or not, I think they'd have you probably do it as you, not as Pintel, but it would be kind of fun to have you kind of swoop in on some big cable and light it as Pintel as well.
Oh my God, that would be the dream come true. You'd have to get permission from Disney.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I'm sure, and the great thing too, I think when the last game I saw up there was the Tennessee game and Shane Leckler lit it. And I mean, just a way to give tribute to these legendary players. I mean, we're the only team with like two of the best punters in NFL history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And even Marquette was a great punter too. He was a heck of a punter.
Yes.
So, but yeah, Ray Guy, I mean, that's the thing about the Raiders, like Jim Otto, the legends. Yeah. I mean, I consider character actors like the O-line of acting.
Yes.
We're the O-line. You need us because we fill out the colors, but obviously the QB and your star positions are going to get the attention. But without an O-line, you're not winning, bro.
No, absolutely. You got to win it up, as they call it, with the uglies, right?
So
that'll be fun.
My specialty of the house, bro.
Lee Arenberg, listen, man, we appreciate you spending the time today. We'll have you on again, I'm sure, especially when we get to talk more about football, as long as it works around your schedule. And I know you got a bunch of stuff, I'm sure, in the works that we'll see very soon. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us today.
Guys, have a great day. Have a great Easter. Rock your pandemic. My message to everyone in the Raider Nation is stay safe, stay strong, and treat the ones you love like you really love them. All right.
That's awesome. Lee Arenberg, we appreciate it. Raider fan, amazing actor. We appreciate you being here. All right, we're going to step aside. When we come back, we're going to talk cornerbacks with Mr. Kelly Kriner and Chaz Osborne as we roll on here on the Silver and Black today on CBS Sports Radio.
How you doing? This is Charlie Garner, and you're listening to Silver and Black Today. Stay tuned.
Indeed, stay tuned. Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. And we're going to talk now about another need, of a position of need in the NFL draft for the Raiders, and that, of course, is cornerback. In the offseason, in this first period of free agency, we saw the Raiders go out and really build that middle of the defense, middle of the line with Malik Collins, linebacker Corey Littleton, Kwiatkowski, all these guys, and up to Demarius Randall, Jeff Heath at safety. But one of the other needs, they tried to sign Eli Apple. That thing didn't work out, right? And so they still need help at cornerback. So we wanted to get down and dirty here and talk with Kelly Kriner, who's our draft expert here on the show, about cornerback prospects in the draft. And if the Raiders were going to either choose one in the first round, who could that be? Or if not, where else could they find a player who would help them in that position, maybe in the third or later round? So, Kelly, we jump in on this. And of course, the big name everybody wants to talk about is Jeff Okudah. He will not be there. There's some Raider fans who think, well, if we do this, it's not going to happen. Jeff Okudah is going to go high in the draft. He'll be gone most likely by the time the Raiders get there. But when you look at the guys remaining, one of the names that's talked about a lot is, of course, C.J. Henderson out of Florida. Kelly, C.J. Henderson, would he be a good fit with Paul Guenther and for the Raiders? And would you take him at 19 if he's there?
Oh, well, I don't think there's any possible chance he's there at 19. There's a good chance he goes 9 to Jacksonville. Like, Henderson may not even be around for 12, to be honest with you. He's probably the best press man corner. He's better than Okudah's better all around, because once you get Henderson in zone, he kind of gets lost, doesn't have his timing down. The only problem with Henderson that I see for the Raiders is he's allergic to tackling, and if John Gruden watches the South Carolina game, there's 4 or 5 plays where he just quits on them. And I just can't see Gruden putting up with that. He makes some plays that you're like, wow, that's the number one corner. That's a guy we want. And then 4 plays later, you're just watching him. I mean, not even dog it, just straight give up on plays and cost your team. I just can't see Gruden. Being able to separate that and being like, you know what, we can work with this, we can do this. I think that's just kind of stick in his craw if they draft this guy.
Well, and also, Kelly, when you look at C.J. Henderson too, he has trouble with handling blocks on the outside, right? Wide receivers often take him just take him out of the play in the film that I watched, and I don't think he does that well. And I think he also has been something that might make him fit in with the image of the Raiders, even if it's not necessarily true, which is he draws penalties. Like he has trouble with his back to the ball. He ends up getting called a lot on that. And so I find it hard to understand people who are really excited about him there. I mean, I think there's other people. You look at Jeff Gladney out of TCU, and of course Trevon Diggs out of Alabama, 2 other guys who are kind of tweeners, first, second round guys. Of course, the Raiders don't have a second round pick as we talk today. Of Diggs, of Gladney, are those guys that you would, if the Raiders were able to maybe trade 19, get into the top of the second round? Is that a guy or 2 guys that you'd consider there?
Yeah, if they're making a trade down at 19, I do like Jeff Gladney. You've seen Diggs' name thrown around even at 19 a few times. The only problem I have with that is I can't get that tape of the LSU game out of my head to where, they were making a point to just destroy him play after. You knew they were going after Diggs. Everybody knew it, and Diggs couldn't do a dang thing to stop it. I mean, it's horribly bad. Now, Diggs was a former wide receiver, so he hasn't been playing corner the whole time. But it's just watching, that's just brutal. With Gladney, you kind of have to have him kind of an off man, because if you give him a few yards of separation, let that wide receiver make his first break, and just because Gladney's feet and speed really good, but his footwork is excellent. So he's going to be a lot better at mirroring that guy after he's already kind of dedicated where his route's going to go.
Well, I like Gladney too. With him, though, of course, he's a little smaller, right? Doesn't have the height and kind of that size that you would expect now at the NFL level. Doesn't mean he doesn't play well, but I think also with him right now, he's got some issues too with discipline, and I think he reminds me a little bit of a corner version of some of those guys who are very aggressive. They become over aggressive when it comes to play, and that ends up being penalties, especially now in the NFL with the way they're calling cornerback receiver contact and all that stuff. Are you concerned with him being a little bit over aggressive, like Jonathan Abram, for example? I mean, that's some of the criticism we heard from Jonathan Abram, as great as a player as I think he's going to be. Do you think he'd have to dial that back again when he gets to the pros?
I don't think so. Not as much with Gladney. I mean, you do see that a lot in college football because the guys know they can get away with a lot more in college football than they can in the pros. So when you know you're going to have to, you can kind of dial that down when you know you're going to have to. Another knock on Gladney, which I've never understood, he's 24 years old, so he's a little older, and a lot of teams look down on that, which I don't really understand because you can still get two good contracts out of a guy if he's worth that second contract, and you don't have to worry about the age because he's still going to be in that early 30s. Which even at corner, you can have guys in the NFL that play that long that still are good into that second contract.
Well, and one of the guys, too, that we hear again, Kelly Kriner, our draft expert, we're talking about Raiders' possibilities at cornerback in this upcoming draft. When you look at Christian Fulton, the more I've watched him, the luster has gone a little bit for me. I see him a lot of the times. His ball skills to me just don't seem as elite as I thought they were. And he's got some judgment, I think, issues there when it comes to covering and what he's able to do in finishing. What do you think of Christian Fulton? And because he's another name that I think people look at and say, man, this could be a guy in the second, third round, depending what happens, that the Raiders could also be interested in.
I really like Fulton, and I would like to see him go to the Raiders at 19. Because you can play him in man and zone. He can do both, and he can do both really well. His ball production did drop off a little bit this year, and then you saw in the national championship game, he didn't have the greatest national championship game, but it wasn't like horrible. It wasn't like the Diggs LSU game, but you saw some things there. A lot of people bring up the fact that he had missed the season because of an issue.
Oh, the
LSU.
test, yeah.
Whatever. I don't really care about that as much, because it's one of those things that he's not going to be in the program for this, so he's kind of worked past that. I just think that when he's better at man and zone, as I said, like Henderson's not, he's not really set up for his own. He's more of a man, and I think that just after this, the talent level after Fulton drops enough to where you see like they're in a different tier. So if you pass on him at 19, if you trade down or anything like that, there's a big enough talent drop to where I'm looking past a little bit of his issues because I know that his ceiling's higher.
Well, but Kelly, the one thing too that I look and watching film of him, and it's been something I've seen with the Raiders over the last few years when it comes to cornerbacks, and that's the inability to wrap up and tackle. And I think that's also one of the downsides of Fulton, and that doesn't concern you?
No, because I mean he's a willing tackler.
No, he's willing. Yeah, that's true.
As long as the play is on his side of the field, like if he's lined up on the right corner and they throw the ball to the left side, not the most interested in running all the way over the field to make the tackle. But yeah, I don't find that as big an issue. Especially, I mean, he's like a tackling machine compared to Henderson. Like it's night and day how much better he is at wrapping up and tackling. But it's one of those things. You don't find a lot of corners now that are really good tacklers. You'll see guys that like to go for the pick or the guys that try to lay you out, but nobody really wraps up that much anymore. It's kind of a lost art.
Well, Kelly, in about the minute we have left here before our break, talk about what guy no one's talking about that you think might be a good get for the Raiders down in the third or later rounds.
Round 3, I really like Bryce Hall out of Virginia. I was shocked he didn't come out of the draft last year. I had him as a late first rounder last year, but the ankle injury at the end of the season, he hasn't been able to work out, didn't get to go to the combine. So I mean, he's really fallen under the radar. If that ankle checks out, he's a first round talent that you can get in the third round, and with 3 third round picks, I mean, you figure the Raiders should be in prime space for that. And another quick one I don't think the Raiders like, just because, as a corner, he's short and he's not that fast, which is really bad. But Amick Robinson out of Louisiana Tech,
Oh, yeah.
this guy's a dog, man. I mean, he will put you on your butt. He will lay you out. But he also had really good ball skills, really good production. It's just he's a tiny dude who's not too fast, which is probably. I mean, I think you could put him in. He could be a nickel. He could cover a tight end, but that's probably his only option in the NFL.
I love the Bryce Hall call out there, Kelly, because he's a big dude too. He's a beast. 200 and some pounds, right? He's just over 200 pounds, and I like the way he plays. He fits in well, I think, with that Raider mentality. All right, well, there you go. We have, of course, we'll continue to roll through some of these positions as we get up to our draft coverage here on CBS Sports Radio 1140 and at silverandblacktoday.com as well. So, Kelly, thank you for that. We're going to step aside for our final break. When we come back, a little bit of this and that, and, of course, a little bit of Kelly's Corner. You're listening to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140.
most in-depth coverage of the Silver and Black. This is Silver and Black Today, live on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Here's your host, Scott Gulbransen.
Welcome back to the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. Thanks for being with us. Hope you're having a great Easter Sunday and you're surviving the quarantine. Yes. It's okay, though. You know, we're doing it in Nevada. I know our numbers have stayed relatively low, and with all due respect and condolences out to those we've lost in our state because of this terrible disease, good to see that people are practicing what they should and staying home for the most part. Although every time I drive out, when I have to go to the grocery store or so, the couple times I've gone, it's amazing to me how many people are out there and what they're doing. But anyway, I'm not here to lecture. We're here to talk about football. And of course, this portion of the show, we spend a little bit, and even though we have to cram it into this last segment, Kelly's Corner. What do you got for us today? I know your 1.6 steps that you took yesterday. What was it? 160 steps?
161 steps is what I took on Friday. And the worst part of that was it said that I did 2 flights of stairs. My bedroom's on the 2nd floor of my house. And I had my phone. I'm sure there's one time my phone wasn't on me when I went upstairs to the bathroom or something. But I basically didn't leave the 1st floor of my house.
Wow.
On Friday. Yeah.
We all have those stories. I had a day where it was just mentally, I'm like, I'm just tired of this, right? And I just could not get myself together. I was just kind of just zoned out. But I still do like my recommendation to you, man. That's your coronavirus memoir title, 161 Steps by Kelly Kriner.
Well, and somebody could probably steal this now, but years ago, before I moved out here, I was working on opening up a liquor store back home. I was going to call it Escalator Liquors, and the tagline was going to be, because 12 steps is just too many.
Oh, jeez.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Quickly, just for my corner here, I've got to throw this thing out here because I love conspiracy theories. But everybody's been talking about, hey, what if there's an issue? What if somebody's spying with all the technology going on with the draft and everything? And then somebody on Twitter put something out. It's like, which GM do you most think will screw up the technology? And of course, Lee Mayock had to put she can't remember which emoji she put on there, but you could tell, she's worried about dad screwing something up. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, oh, great. Just another chance for the NFL to screw over the Raiders. Say we're in there trying to trade up from 12 or trade back from 19 or whatever. If anything goes wrong, here we go. It's the NFL screwing the Raiders over again. It's that I could already see this happening. I can already see something coming up because we hear all the time about how the NFL and everybody's out after the Raiders. Any small glitch like this will be huge. And let's be honest, it may be something that, because I don't really plan on John Gruden and Mike Mayock being the most. Let's say I doubt they're the most computer savvy guys you're going to run into. Neither one of them see like they're really into that.
Self-admitted.
So if something gets screwed up, I'm 99.9% sure that it's on their side. But that 0.1% is just always going to be stuck in the back of your mind. It's like, well, did this happen, or did the NFL do this, or did another team do this, and the NFL's not looking into it? So I am praying that everything goes smoothly on the Raiders draft for the pure and simple reason that I do not want to hear for the next 20 years about how that 2020 draft, man, the NFL did this so we couldn't get enter name here like we were trying to.
It's a good point. That's the last thing the Raider Nation needs is another conspiracy from the NFL.
Seriously. I don't see it being a problem, though.
No.
I don't think it will either, but the second something happens. But yeah, it's funny because I tweeted at Lee Mayock. It's like, you should have just named any other GM. And she goes, it would have been a lie. So she's pretty much on the fence that if one GM's screwing up, she thinks Dad's pulling that off.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, well, here we go, guys. We another show in the bag from Bunker Broadcasting and on CBS Sports Radio 1140. I want to thank Trent Ogle and, of course, Mark Bonilla back making sure we stay on the air and all of you guys. And of course, we'll have some news soon about our draft coverage and what we're doing around that. So stay tuned for that. Also, make sure you subscribe to our podcast, Radio Archive feed, wherever you get your podcast, so you can hear this show after the fact, or as we break down the interviews individually as well. Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get it. Also, as part of our now Silver and Black Today media group, make sure you also subscribe to Evan Grote's Just Pod Baby as well, found in all of the same locations, and also visit silverandblacktoday.com. Guys, wrap it up. We're getting closer to the draft. It's time for us to just get immensely into paperwork and draft reports. Kelly's already got it in his head because he's like a walking draft computer. But for Chaz and I, we got to study. But guys, it'll be fun here. It's going to be virtual, but at least it'll be sports, right?
Yeah, but I mean, after the draft, man, the only thing that worries me is, the draft's coming up in a couple weeks. But after that, who knows how long it's going to be before we have anything else.
Very true.
But I feel like the Raiders, with the free agency, the Raiders really set themselves up with, tremendous flexibility going into the draft. So I feel like it's going to be another winner for sure.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's been some folks on our YouTube chat. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go do that now. Hit notifications and all. They're up there and they're talking about, let's take defense first round. And you know me, I've always been a defense guy, that they needed it, but they addressed the needs so well, I think, that in free agency, like you said, Chaz, that this gives them the opportunity and the flexibility in that first round to take a receiver and then maybe even move down and get another pick in the second round so that they can go get a cornerback or whatever else they need. So to me, that to me would be the most likely scenario. But you never know with these things, right? We're not GMs, but we'd like to play them on TV. Anyway, for Kelly Kriner, for Chaz Osborne, thank you guys all for being with us. Again, this is the Silver and Black Today here on CBS Sports Radio 1140. May the autumn wind always be at your back, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Take care of one another. Bye-bye.